Welcome to the After Chapter podcast, a podcast for those moments when the life you plan no longer fits and the next step isn't yet clear. I'm Michelle Lamar.
And I'm Cecilia Nelson Hurt. Each episode, we sit down for honest conversations with people navigating change, exploring identity, self-authorship, and what it means to build what's next from the inside out.
And with each conversation, we'll mark it with a shared sip of wine, cocktail, or a mocktail as a simple ritual of presence and pause.
This is the After Chapter podcast, pouring into what's next, one conversation at a time. So, Michelle, this is it, episode 1. We have a lot to cover: who we are, why we're doing this, and so much more. But before we get started, we have one rule. We don't go deep until you pour.
Absolutely. You know, this is part of our ritual for each episode, and it is a time for us to pause and be present.
So, as our resident cork master, what have you chosen to christen this ship?
Well, it is our first episode, so it is a celebration. Though what I chose can be had at any time, but I chose a champagne. And specifically, I chose a Cherlin champagne, which is a historic French champagne house. And it was what makes it a little bit more special. It was brought to the United States in 2016 through an alliance led by Isaiah Thomas, who is Detroit Pistons NBA champion and Hall of Famer. So it has brought... And it has made Cherlin one of the largest Black-owned champagne companies in the country.
I like that connection and that little bit of history there. But why did you choose this bottle specifically?
And I chose it, as said, because it's a celebration, but it is really about legacy and reinvention, which is what
I like that.
we will be talking about throughout this entire season of our podcast.
It's very much on brand. I like that.
I really love the sound of that cork pop. That always makes me happy.
Same. Music to my ears. So, cheers to the start of the conversation. Cheers.
So, with our glass in hand, we can begin and talk about, some of the reasons of why we're here.
Yeah, exactly. We both have day jobs, our 9 to 5, and so this is our other 9 to 5. And so why do we decide to turn on the mics?
So for me, this started being in the industry, which in fact how we first met some years ago.
We won't say. No.
But financial services specifically. And so we spent, and especially being in the financial services, you start your whatever the role is, and you are asked, and suggested in terms of your finances, making sure that those are in order and how to do that. And so there's a lot of planning, strategy around that. And so it started making me think about how we really plan the money, but what happens, how do we plan, but we don't really plan the time. What happens with the time? And when I say time is, we talk about the financial savings that we do for that time in your life, when you're retiring, or perhaps you've decided to start a business of your own or take a pause. But again, if we plan for the money, but how do we and why do we not plan the time?
I think that's such a good point for us to take a look at. I know so many people who worked for so long, and that big moment of that chapter, right? Yeah. Of the work or the raising the kids or taking care of those around you has ended. And now you're about to start this new chapter and you find yourself with all this time.
Yeah.
And what do you do with that time?
Right.
And so I do think this is a relevant and needed conversation and an exploration that people don't have to wait until they get to that last page of one chapter to start thinking and planning for the next.
Correct. And as I've been thinking about this, and as I said, the first spark has been around the life transition of retirement specifically. Some of the things that I've been looking at and reading about, and I'll take, I have to look at some of my notes because I want to make sure I get the stat correct, is that it found that retirement increases the likelihood of clinical depression by about 40%. And why that stat is so relevant and why that stat is there is it's around, people, as I said, plan that finance, but they don't plan what are they doing with the time. And so when you think you have no purpose any longer, of course, then that's where the clinical depression sets in.
Yeah, no, that really resonates with me, particularly as I think about my own journey. I spend so much of my time as a chief officer of inclusion and spend decades on strategy and helping people to feel like they belong within an organization. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm thinking about that legacy. So I love that our toast speaks to legacy. So I'm thinking about the next 5 to 7 years when I might not work in the same way that I'm working. And so what am I going to do with my time and where do I belong? And if I don't, introduce myself with the particular title, then who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's why I think we decided to call it really the After Chapter podcast, because life keeps moving. Even after, those chapters, as one you've mentioned around the titles, any life transitions, life does keep moving on. But by pouring into ourselves after those transitions is where we don't lose that story. We really get to add to it. We pour into the what's next.
Yeah, no, this is exciting. And I'm looking forward to a lot of the conversations that we'll be having as we dive into this. And, I think it's important while we both have expertise in our fields, this is something that we're exploring because it's a chapter that we are looking forward to. So we are not experts by any means, but we do have a passion around this. And, in the field of inclusion, I've been seeing a lot of stats. You talk about the stats about when somebody stops working, the depression, because they feel they might not have that purpose any longer. But we also know that we are living longer. And so if you think about retiring at 62 or 65, when you can very well live to 90, and, I look at our parents and our grandparents, and our 50 is not their 50, our 55 is not their 55. And so thinking about the energy that you'll still have, what do you want to do with that?
Right. Absolutely. And it's really during, these transitions, you don't want your brain to stop. And, that's where that depression comes in because, you are now living longer, as said, as we're all living longer. And so it could be, not stopping and using your brain because whether that's retirement, whether that's divorce, whether that's an empty nester, we need to have a purpose. And that's at whatever age. It could be you're in your 40s and you have a life transition happening. But if you don't have a purpose where you have your brain truly working and doing something you're passionate about, or even just having a routine in your life, this is when these gaps happen.
I can see that. I think about I've heard that couples who get ready to retire, it's so important that they plan together because one person is still thriving and working and the other one is home bored.
Right.
And so all their friends, like all of the play dates are working. And so important to find spaces and time to take this energy and channel it in a good way.
Yeah. And I will even say whether you have a partner or you're in a couple, you may not retire at the same time, at the same age, for whatever the reason, whether that's an age gap or one partner does not want to.
Yeah.
I think it's just really important that we individually figure out and understand what our purpose is, what we're passionate about, what are the things that, piques our interest a little bit so that we can be, we can thrive, And so it is that making sure that you have your own identity.
So key, because you are more than a title.
Yeah.
And whatever that title, not just your corporate title, you're more than the wife, mother, caregiver.
Yeah.
And so figuring out who you are, and I think about when we talk about that figuring out and that how you see yourself, it brings us to the identity cliff.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, that's scary.
Yes.
And so I think about you, Michelle. You are a communications expert, communications executive. And so what if you could not introduce yourself as that? What would you say? Hi, I'm Michelle, and I...
Well, I think that for answer also at this point in my life is even a little bit harder for me because I am in a life transition, as you know, but for the audience, so I am in a career transition where I'm not in my corporate job. And so those, months afterwards, and I could even say even now, just thinking about it, even through, thinking about with this podcast, how, again, going back to even my own advice, as an individual, who are you? And so, it is very difficult whereby I'm not introducing myself as a VP of inclusion. I'm not introducing myself as a VP of corporate communications at this time. And so it does give you a great bit of pause to now think about. And, I saw this reel online that talked about if you could not introduce yourself as a husband, a wife, a sibling, a mother, any caretaker, or a title, how can you introduce yourself and talk about yourself in 5 words?
Oh, that's so good.
And I that gave me great pause because I think for many people, when they talk about themselves, they say, "Oh, I'm the wife.
Yeah.
I'm a sister.
I'm defined
I'm
by
a
all these other
friend,
roles.
I'm whatever, or your title." But if you just have to stand on your own, how comfortable are we to do that?
Yeah. This is going to be a good exercise. I know the thing I like about this conversation I'm looking forward to is leaving a trail of thought starters for people to take away, right? So after the conversation has ended, that they've logged off of the podcast, and I'd like to leave people thinking.
A pause.
A pause.
Yeah.
A pause and a sip.
Yeah.
Which I'll do that right now because that's what I like to do. So, it sounds like we spend our 20s and 30s trying to adult, trying to prove that we're busy, trying to really earn whatever that title is, right? So whether it's the family title, the professional title, and then we spend so much of that time being busy, burning the candle at both ends, particularly if you're raising a family and chasing your career. And now we have to unlearn that busyness and introduce a new way of thinking about our time.
Yeah. And as you had just talked about, leaving people with a pause, with a, a sip. We want that when you are listening to this podcast and making sure that you are taking that pause, making sure that you are leaving here and thinking a little bit more introspectively about yourself. So, bi-weekly, we are going to leave you with those pauses. One small thing that you can maybe think about, one small thing that you can do to get you to be a little bit more prepared for the transition that you are perhaps currently in, or it is preparing for a transition that is to come.
I like that. And so, as we're thinking about that breadcrumb, and we're thinking about the thing that we'd like you, the listener, to do, your assignment for this week is to audit your energy. And so notice the thing that you do that makes time just fly. The thing you're doing and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've been doing this for so long. Not work, not chores, but just something that brings you joy. And so when you find yourself in that rhythm, write it down.
Yeah.
Perhaps that could be your first clue as to what's next.
Yeah. I also wanted to make sure that we talk a little bit more about each other. I mean, as we said, we're introducing ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, Cecilia and I have known each other for some years, which started in financial services, as said. But maybe just talking a little bit about where we are in our life in terms of if there is a transition that's taking place. As I shared, mine at this particular point has been around career transition and taking the pause. And again, pauses can be forced.
Yeah.
Or they can be ones that you are proactively taking to really think about, because of that transition, what could be next for you, but what could be next that's also going to fill your cup.
Fill your cup.
Where it isn't, as you said, when we're doing this exercise of the audit energy, where it isn't where we're spending all of our time and time is going by, but it's not going by where it's something that we are energized by, but perhaps it is something that's draining you. So, making sure that, take notice of which of the two sides it is. But as I said, so if you're comfortable to just share a little bit about you and
that's so important.
Maybe some of the transitions perhaps that you're thinking of.
Yeah, no, I'm, having just celebrated a huge birthday, not even a big birthday, a huge birthday. And it's like 5 years ago, I was not thinking about the next 5 years. So if you look, like 5 years ago, I was deep into the work of inclusion, and the world needed it. It was a call to action for the work and the expertise. And so my big birthday, which I knew was coming, looming, once I got there, I started thinking, well, I have less years in front of me than I do in back of me, and less than 10, really, at the end of the day. And so I'm thinking about, what am I going to do? When do I wind down this chapter? So when is the when? But I also know that I will not stop working. It might not be a corporate role. It might not be a traditional 9 to 5. I haven't figured it out yet. But what I'm paying attention to are the things that I enjoy doing. And so a lot of this started, with the work that I've been doing with the Girl Scouts. And so first starting just really having respect for the organization of the Girl Scouts and what they're doing. My hobby is knitting, and so I love to knit, and I travel and knit, and wherever I go, I visit a yarn shop. But I also like to teach, and so I was, I had the opportunity to teach the Girl Scouts how to knit at their summer camp.
And not to cut you off, but I just want to say how knitting is not my thing. It does not give me energy. I know you have tried teaching me, and I got a little bit of the knitting, but as I kept doing it, it just made me more and more anxious.
And so that's
when
not
is
for
this
you.
project going to be done?
You have to just.
So again, audit your energy. You would think knitting is something relaxing for people.
It is.
For me, it is not.
Anyhow, it will. I'm not giving up on you yet.
Okay.
I feel I'm gonna hold out hope that one day you'll pick up the yarn needle and you'll start to knit. But with that, with the knitting and with the volunteering and doing a lot of things for a lot of different not-for-profits, I'm thinking about, what I do next. Could it have a lens in either knitting or women and children, or finding a way to give back? So for me, I'm at that taking stock of my skill set. Do I have the skill set? I'm actually thinking about doing, this is going to be the first time that you're hearing this, a certificate on fundraising. Because if a lot of organizations, they want you to fundraise, and being on a board, you have to fundraise. And it's not just asking your 10 friends, because your 10 friends will get sick of you every time you're coming around asking them to give you money. So I'm thinking about taking a certificate class and learning how to fundraise and seeing where that will lead.
Right. Following the breadcrumbs.
Following the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will also share that that hobbies and things of that nature, I can attribute some of that exploration to you in some way. And this was some years ago, whereby, when there were things like Groupon, and so I remember you were getting into your knitting, and you had said to me, what are your hobbies? And deer in the headlights.
You're like wine.
And so as I hear from family, friends, and I'll say many times I would say more so women than men, but many, and again, that's probably because that's who I'm surrounding myself with more. But as I hear from them, so many people don't have hobbies because many times, and I will give the example of, the online dating, whereby you need to write down what your hobbies are. And many people that I've heard, no, they don't leave it blank. They said I was going to be very honest, my hobbies are eating, drinking, and streaming shows. But I can't write that. So I need to make up some things. And so as they start thinking about it, they're like, you know what? I don't have any hobbies. I really don't. And so more, and I hear that, as I said, more and more, at least the people I know, many of the people that I know, when you really ask them, they do not have hobbies. They do things here and there, but it's not a hobby. This is something that I will do on a regular basis, and that really brings me joy. And so as I hear more and more about it, I think it's just so important. As said, it doesn't have to be whereby you're, a few years away from retirement. I think people should really start thinking about these hobbies, and just as your portfolio, your financial portfolio is diversified, your hobbies need to be diversified, because there are hobbies that may cost some coin.
Yeah.
Some more than others, but then there are some that you need to find that if they're not free, they're just low-hanging fruit. They're very low cost. And so we need to have a mix of the two so that we can find things that really do fulfill us. And as we get older, we are still pouring into that, and that is still pouring into us.
I like that. I have seen an increase, though, in conversations around the analog bag.
Tell me more.
The analog bag, right? And so I don't know. I think, is it Gen X or the millennials who are gravitating? So I always confuse the two. But the analog bag is, and it's mostly women. And so the analog bag is this bag that you lug around your home.
Okay.
And so when you go to sit down, and in the bag, you have things like your coloring. If you're into the coloring, you have your knitting, you have like your junk journal or your journal. Some people have cards in it. And so it's the things that take you away from doom scrolling.
Okay.
And so that's why it's called an analog bag, because it's not digital.
Yes.
Right? So it's not my iPad. Right. And so I'm really, as somebody who's been knitting for over 20 plus years, to see people putting knitting and things that I enjoy doing or things that I've dabbled with over a period of time.
Can I put wine in mine?
I would expect nothing less than wine to be in your analog bag. Yeah. I would appreciate that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You can start there.
Okay.
I'm not giving up on you yet. But analog bag, that's your assignment, to think about, if you were going to have an analog bag, what would you put in your bag?
Right.
It could be a book you like to read.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. So, as we wind down, no pun intended, this has been a great intro to the conversation, the exploration, and topics to come.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the pauses. So, auditing our energy, where we are doing things that really energize us, but where we're not looking at the clock. I love the analog bag idea, perhaps even if you just think about it and not necessarily have an actual bag, but even just thinking about what would you put in that crate, and thinking about some of the things. Maybe it's not you're doing it for hours, but you know what, I like to, I like writing for maybe 30 minutes. And then as part of these little breadcrumbs and start thinking about that. And another pause that we can all take as well. And again, you don't have to do all these things. We are not experts, but just it gives you a pause to think about it. The other thing, as we mentioned, is how would you describe yourself in
like
5 words
I'm gonna do that assignment.
where you are not describing yourself in your title, your career title, or as a caregiver, or your place in your family?
I'm going to do that assignment. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And so we want to thank everyone
Absolutely.
for joining our first podcast.
Yay, us. Cheers to us.
Cheers to us for getting it done. Hitting play.
Absolutely. So we are looking forward to our next episode.
I'm excited.
Yeah, which is really going to talk about, it's not necessarily a celebration, but that episode is really going to talk about that Monday dilemma.
Yes, and so that moment when the alarm clock doesn't go off and your inbox is silent, right? And you have to decide, how am I going to spend my day? How am I going to spend my time?
Yeah.
I just don't want to fill my time. I want to be productive. I want it to mean something. And so I'm looking forward to that
Absolutely.
Conversation.
Great.
And so
well, thank
joining
you, Cecilia,
us. Thank you,
for
Michelle.
being your authentic self, being present.
Thank you.
And thank you, all of you, for joining us on our first episode. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for spending time with us on the After Chapter podcast.
If something in today's conversation stayed with you, we hope you carry it gently into whatever chapter you're living right now.
You don't need to have it figured out to be here.
Like, follow, subscribe, and share with someone who might need a companion in the in-between.
Until next time, pause, take a sip, and stay with what's unfolding.